Hello and welcome along once again to It'll Be Alright in the 90s, the podcast that went to see Red Hot Chili Peppers at the weekend and can't believe they didn't play any tracks from their 1995 masterpiece One Hot Minute album. I'm Stu Scar Tissue Joslin, and joining me as always is Alex Give It Away Greenwood. Greenie, good evening mate, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Music is my aeroplane. You know that. You know that full well.
One Hot Minute is such an underrated album. Dave Navarro is such an underrated member of in the Chili Peppers, multiverse, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
But I suppose John Frusciante wouldn't want to play any of his stuff, would he? So there you go.
He's not with his fierce ego and pride. We know that. But it is a shame though, because that is a great song, and always makes me think of that Woodstock '94 appearance. Was it '94 where they had the light bulb heads?
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Definitely the lesser talked about of the Woodstock, the 90s Woodstocks, isn't it? '94. I think a lot of people forget that there was a '94 version because '99 gets so many of the headlines for the shit show that it was. But I think of that gig anyway when I think of that era of the Chili Peppers.
And it's right that we should begin on a musical note because our guest tonight is Jon Amor, who's going to be coming in to tell us all about his 1990s, and we're very much looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Before we go any further, our sponsor for this episode is Great Mills. If you simply quote the code ALRIGHT90s at the checkout at participating stores, you can claim 5% off the purchase price of any 4-piece bathroom suite in the penthouse brown, cashmere beige, or avocado colour schemes. That's Great Mills. Make yourself at home.
I've been waiting for us to get Great Mills. I knew we were going to get them sooner or later.
Yeah. It took us a while to get them on side, but we got there in the end. Do you have any particular memories of the Chippenham branch?
Well, yeah, many a weekend I would have gone down to the Bumpers Farm retail estate with my dad because he was a painter and decorator, so we would have been in there a lot. And then of course it moved, didn't it, to the newer area near the Sainsbury's, which was it was never as good as Bumpers Farm, in my opinion. I think it all went downhill a bit from there. Then it became a Focus.
Yeah. We don't have it's an M&S food hall now. We don't have a local Great Mills anymore. But yeah, if you can find your local store, go and use that code by all means. So my Great Mills story, and this is one that my mum, at the age of 33, she still likes to wheel this out on occasion. Apparently, in about 1991, when I was 3, I wet myself in the Chippenham branch of Great Mills. I don't remember it. I don't know anything about it, but for some reason it still gets brought up from time to time.
I'm just glad that it got the blue plaque that it deserved, that incident. Well, there you go. I don't think I've ever wet myself in any of the retail properties in the Greater Chippenham area, but I probably have. I'm sure I have.
I'll tell you what. If you have listened at home, please do write in and let us know. We'd love to know. Maybe we can create a heat map of sorts of retail parks units that were urinated in by our listeners during the 90s.
We have some correspondence, which is always nice. We always appreciate. Let me just get it up. We had Kate Pro, legend of the pod Kate Pro, got in touch with some a sort of selection of thoughts actually on various things. A sort of Kate Pro update that she gives me every now and again.
Oh, lovely.
In relation to I think this is probably in relation to the birthday episode where we were talking about snacks. She said, does anyone remember the fish and chips crisps / nibbles that were around in the 90s? I think I know what she means. I can picture the packet. I think it might still be around. The packet looks a bit like a newspaper.
Yes,
you know
yes,
what I mean?
Of course.
They're still around, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
But it definitely would have been around in the late 90s, I'd have thought. And a good birthday snack, I think. And she also, I can't remember exactly when we were talking about this. I think it was probably in the last episode in relation to cereal toys that were given away in cereal boxes. And she says she wants to give a shout out to the bike spoke jangle things. Because we obviously talked about the reflectors that you got on your bike spokes. Kellogg's famously gave some away in their cereals in the 90s. But I don't think we mentioned the jangle things. And they definitely deserve a shout out as one of the most 90s bike accessories. We definitely had some. I don't know if we came in a cereal box or we just bought them or what, but we had a few. Occasionally you'd hear someone coming. Their wheel would be full of them and it'd make a right racket coming down the road. I have no idea if kids have them anymore. Probably not. probably couldn't get one on an electric scooter.
No, I suppose not. That's a shame. Yeah, that's a real shame.
Yeah.
And then finally, the bastion of the 90s goes by the wayside.
Yeah. And finally, she says, she's just a little comment here that I went back and listened and I couldn't work out, but she says, during your, as in your Stu, as in you Stu, during your retelling of the school trip sleepover that you mentioned in the birthday episode, it sounds like you said the C word. So I'm not sure if you did. We would have bleeped it out if you had. But
I'm sorry.
If any other listeners heard that, we apologise. I think it must have been a slip of the audio because I couldn't hear it when I went back and listened.
No, I certainly wouldn't have done.
No,
if it sounds like it, I apologise. And no, yeah, definitely is. It's not something I would do on the podcast. Not something I do in general. So yeah, apologies to anyone who was offended, and we'll get it sorted out.
Yeah, absolutely. But thanks for pointing that out, Kate. And we also have some correspondence from the lovely McRufus, friend of the pod, who often sends us some great correspondence on Instagram. So McRufus had a couple of things to say. In relation to the birthday episode, they say that Pizza Hut birthdays were definitely a thing for me too. They once made me stand on my chair on the already raised area of the room whilst I was made to hold a red balloon, brackets, which was the same colour as my face at this point, and they sang Happy Birthday. It was at the Shaw Ridge Pizza Hut in Swindon after we'd been bowling and then seen Aladdin at the cinema. So that sounds like a horrible experience, but also a really sort of the real essence of 90s birthdays there. So there was Pizza Hut, there was the cinema to see Aladdin, and there was bowling. So a real trifecta of terror there for 90s birthdays. So thank you for that. But she also posited a theory, which I thought was really interesting, so I wanted to bring to the table, not related specifically to the 90s, but to nostalgia as a whole. She thinks the summer that you leave school is the most nostalgic summer in anyone's life. And I would say that's true.
Oh, yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, I still long for the long summer nights of 2005.
Yeah,
definitely.
2003 for me, hottest summer on record at that point. And yeah, absolutely the most nostalgic summer of anyone's life. And then finally, Hannah Kelly Fletcher, friend of the pod, says in relation to the cigarettes and alcohol episode, of course, Hannah did contact us for this episode to say that she used to sell cigarettes from the newsagent, which was her first job. I think it was in the 90s, and she gave us a price. But she also says that her first taste of alcohol was sherry from her nan, and she wanted to know why they make sherry glasses perfect for the size of children. If anyone's got any answers to that question, we'd love to know. But it's a good point, I think. And then also in relation to what the most 90s footwear was, she also thought kickers, which did come up. But she also said daps. I thought it was quite interesting. I think maybe daps, or as they're called in other parts of the country or the world, plimsolls, I suppose.
So are we talking the sort of black rubber shoes with a little bit of elastic in the middle, which were a mainstay of the PE kit in primary school PE kit throughout the 90s? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I do wonder, they were probably around for decades before the 90s and we just never knew. But yeah, I mean, all through school, well, primary school, big look, the DAP. Mine had laces. I never had the ones with elastic.
Ooh.
It's a bit embarrassing in a way that anything that's slightly different is embarrassing when you're at school. But yeah, there you go. Good point, Hannah, anyway, with the DAPs. So thank you for that correspondence. Actually, also, sorry, Craig Fletcher, husband of the pod, says the most 90s dessert, because this was something that we had discussed in the last episode, what were the most 90s dessert? I also put it on social media. He says that apple rounds were big after-dinner treats when he was growing up. And I know that Craig grew up in Newcastle, so I don't know if it's a regional thing. I don't really know much about apple rounds. Do you?
No,
have you ever
me neither. We'll have to ask Craig to write back in and expound on that for us for the next episode, so that we can inform the people.
Yeah. I don't know why I refer to him as the husband of the pod. I think it's because I just read out a message from Hannah, who is his wife. So it was a husband and wife sort of correspondence double act there.
Yeah.
Both of which we appreciate. So yeah, if anyone else wants to get in contact with us, we'll give the details as usual at the end. You don't have to be married to get in contact. Singletons also welcome.
Before we close the correspondence part of the show, there are a couple of bits of correspondence from me. So first of all, going back to the size of the sherry glasses. So here's some classic 90s parenting for you. My parents, when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, when we had a Sunday dinner, used to allow me to have a small, like as in a couple of mouthfuls, glass of wine.
Nice. And
I had my own tiny wine glass, which was enough to hold just enough amount of wine for an 8-year-old child. So thanks for that, Gina and Glyn. The other thing, coming from our children's TV episode, 2-parter with Sam Michael from a couple of weeks ago, which was very well received, and thanks to Sam again for coming on to talk to us. I was doing some more research around Sooty and Co, and I uncovered something which I should have really researched at the time, and I didn't feel like it should pass without any comment. So I'm just going to read this out to you now and see what you think, okay?
Okay, yeah.
A particularly controversial episode of the show was Sue's Babies, where Sue pretended to be pregnant. It received complaints from viewers, was reported in the national press, and made E4's top 20 most controversial TV programmes at number 20. On the E4 show, Brenda Longman, who plays Sue in the show, said the idea came about because Matthew tended to write for his daughter. Matthew said he recalled his daughter wandering into his room with a pillow up her jumper, saying she was going to have a baby. He also said how it was a sort of educational piece. Okay, and then here's the here's the final sentence, which comes from nowhere and is probably the best part of the whole thing. Uri Geller said the story was played in a nice and humorous way. Now, I presume this has been lifted from he's been a talking head on E4's top 20 most controversial TV programs, but it's nice to get Uri Geller's opinion on this, I think.
Oh, I think so. Yeah. He's a good sort of 90s pundit, isn't he?
So, definitely. The yardstick to measure these things by. Good old Yuri.
Yeah. I actually read about this as well when we were doing prep for that episode, but I also didn't mention it in the episode itself. There's a line where Sue says something like, "I've got the whole Manchester United team inside me. I feel like I've got the whole Manchester United team inside me," or something like that, which sounds clearly.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
A joke for the parents, possibly.
Yeah, I guess so. But I did think that was funny. Yeah, that Sooty and Co had this moment of controversy in its past for such a lovely kids program. On the face of it, there was this blue side. I thought that was good. Yeah.
Matthew Corbett letting his dark side out. Time again for What's the Most 90s, and we're going down the literary avenue this week. So, Alex, what I want to know is, what do you think is the most 90s children's book series?
Oh, series. Was it series? I've just gone for a specific book. Is that okay?
No, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, okay, no problem.
Although you saying series has made me think of another one that I didn't come up with. The book I've gone for is Flower Babies. But really, that is to represent any Anne Fine book, because I think of Anne Fine as being the quintessential late 80s and 90s children's author. She also wrote Bill's New Frock, which was a big book. I remember being read to me at school. And she also wrote Madame Doubtfire, which was obviously made into Mrs. Doubtfire, the film. And I just think her books were so big at this time. She was the author that was sort of, I think, probably most often read in primary schools in the 90s. Flower Babies was the main one that I remember. I'm sure a lot of other people will. So yeah, that was my choice really, and fine. But when you said series, that did make me think Animal to Farthing Wood seems very 90s. I assume it was written in the 90s. The TV series was definitely in the 90s. I should have talked about that in the kids' TV. I totally forgot about that.
Oh, these things always come up. It's like when I forgot about Spender for the forgotten TV one.
Yeah. I loved that program, and I read all the books as well. Loved those books. So yeah, one of them, I suppose. What about you?
Well, I mean, I had a couple of thoughts, but then I had to go with one that I actually indulged in and read a lot. So when I was thinking about book series, I thought about Goosebumps, which was something that I wasn't really into. I had a board game of Goosebumps, bizarrely, but I don't think I ever read one of the books. Animal Arc was another one, which was which was ubiquitous in certainly in my primary school. And before we move on to my choice, I just want to do a little animal art quiz with you if I can.
Oh, please. Yeah,
because all of the titles of the animal art books, and there are about 50 of them, follow the standard format X in the Y, right? So it might be dog at the door or something like that, okay? So what I want to do is I've got 5 here. I'm going to tell you who the animals are, and I want you to guess where they are, bearing in mind that they will always be in an alliterative place. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So, first one, puppies in the...
Parlour?
No.
Pound?
No.
Were they stray?
One more guess.
Post office?
I'd have read that. It's actually puppies in the pantry. There you go.
That's what I meant, parlour. What am I talking about, parlour? It's not like the 1930s.
All right, I'll give you half for that. Then I'll give you half for that. Okay. Badger in the
back office. B.
He's running things from the back office. Yeah.
Yeah. Bedroom.
No.
Sounds too blue, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know. What is it? What's B?
Matthew Corbett wrote that one. It's Badger in the basement.
Basement, of course.
Okay. So now we're going out on a bit of a limb now. Okay.
Yeah.
Shetland in the.
Shetland. Shetland in the shed.
Correct. Shetland in the shed.
Yes.
For 1 point. Brilliant. Good. Okay. Lamb in the. And this is one where it's not really a room. I have to say.
Is it the Lada?
No, it's not the Lada. No.
Oh.
You might have a room for this, or for doing this, I should say.
I don't know. In the interests of editing, I give up.
It's lamb in the laundry.
Oh, in the laundry. Okay, yeah.
All right, last one. Otter in the.
Otter in the.
We've had one similar to this previously.
Oh God, what begins with ot? Everyone else, people listening are going to be like shouting it out. Does it begin with OT or is it?
It doesn't. No, it's OUT.
Outhouse.
Otter in the outhouse, correct.
Okay.
Lovely bit of content there. I'm sure everybody really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
So my favourite children's books were the slimline volumes of collected Garfield cartoons that you used to be able to get in the little paperbacks, each with a different title. I love those. I would always collect them at car boots or charity shops or wherever I might find them. I'm still a big Garfield fan to this day. Follow him on Instagram to catch up with what he's up to. I remember one of my favourites was a big long storyline where Garfield, John, his own Odie, the dog, and loads of passers-by, incrementally, they all keep getting caught up in this roller blind that they've all got caught up in. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't remember how it ends because it goes on for like pages and pages. So I looked it up online, and eventually a fireman just comes along and just cuts the blind with some scissors and then lets them all out, and everybody celebrates. And everybody's happy. But yeah, no, those books brought me a great deal of enjoyment in my childhood. So no hesitation in giving the Garfield slimline volumes my vote for the most 90s children's books. And
Fine and Garfield together again,
side by side in the ledger.
Yeah, absolutely.
Superb.
I did also want to mention a book called A Turbulent Term of Tyke Tyler, which was actually published in 1977, but I really remember this from primary school. It was a book about an unruly child, and then there's this real twist at the end where it turned out who you assumed they were a boy because of their behaviour, and they actually turned out to be a girl. And I couldn't remember. I didn't know what it was called for years, but I eventually found it out. And I just wanted to say that in case anyone else remembers that book or remembers a book where there's a big twist at the end and it turned out it was a girl. And it was The Turbulent Term of Tyke Tyler. That might only appeal to people who went to Regis School between 1989 and 1996, but there you go. Just wanted to put a call out.
Let us know. Our guest this time is one of Wiltshire's favourite musical sons. In 1991, he burst onto the worldwide blues scene playing guitar with the Hoax, a band who is still regarded as one of Europe's best. And since 1999, he's prolifically released his own music, the most recent of which came in 2018 with the critically acclaimed Colour in the Sky album. He's just returned from a string of performances at this year's Glastonbury Festival, and tonight he's here to tell us what the 1990s means to him. It's an honour and a pleasure to welcome onto the podcast Jon Amor. Jon, the first question has to be, mate, how was Glasgow?
Oh, well, I seem to have spent the last few days moaning about having to play Glastonbury, which isn't very cool, is it? It was a great experience. it's just hard work walking everywhere. It's so massive, isn't it? It's like a massive city. It's not the first time I've been there, I should add, but so I knew what to expect. But we were playing 3 gigs on some of the outside stages there, and it just seemed like a hell of a distance between them all. But I did enjoy it. But it broke me. I got to be honest. I'm still recovering, I think.
Well, we are honoured and privileged to have you in your first public appearance since you returned. It really is a pleasure to have you, mate.
Thank you, man.
Right, we're gonna do our usual interview questions for you, Jon, as we have done with previous guests, and it makes sense to start with the beginning of the decade. So, we want to ask you what your life was like in 1990.
Well, 1990, I was just about to turn 19. I was 18, 19. And I was kind of in limbo, really. I'd completely flunked my A-levels. I left school in 89. I mean, just made a complete mess of my exams. Mainly because I don't think I knew what the hell I wanted to do in my life. I didn't really want to go to university. All I really wanted to do at that point was play cricket and play guitar in my bedroom, which I was quite happy doing. I didn't really have many mates because I lived in a little village in the middle of nowhere. Didn't have a girlfriend, really. Didn't have a job. And so I was drifting a little bit. But I eventually did get a part-time job in a wine shop in Devizes, which is slightly ironic for someone who eventually became a fully qualified alcoholic. But that's a whole other podcast. And if I look out my window here in my living room, I can see the very wine shop that I worked at just across the street, so I haven't come very far. But yeah, I was working there during the days, going home and playing my guitar in the evenings on my own, playing along to records. And at the weekends, I was running up and down a cricket field, bowling my heart out for my cricket club. And that's all I really wanted to do at that stage. But I was being pestered by a kid who lived up the road from me called Robin Davey, who had just started playing guitar, and he kept ringing my house and trying to get me up to his house for a jam with him and his brother. And his brother had started playing guitar as well, Jesse, and Rob eventually moved on to bass. And they kept hassling me to go up and jam with him. I really didn't want to because I just wanted to play on my own. I was perfectly happy, and I didn't think they'd be very good. But I eventually gave in and went up and had a jam with them, and that I guess was the beginnings of the hoax. Yeah, in Great Cheverel, in deepest darkest Wiltshire. So that was how that started, and we did our first gig. My first public performance, I think, was September 1990 in Great Cheverel Pavilion for a birthday party. In fact, I think it was Rob and Jess's dad's birthday party, and he sang with us. We did 4 or 5 songs, I think, but that was my first time I sort of played in front of anybody, and it was, yeah, I think I got the bug. I wouldn't go so far as to say it was a shaft of light, but that's what got us started.
Okay, so if we move forward a few years in the decade then and move on to 1995, so the hoax formed properly in 1991, and then by this time the first albums come out. Is that correct?
No, we hadn't done oh yeah, 95. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, 95 really was the thick of it. We had quite a sharp rise. Once we did get started in 91, our reputation grew quite quickly, and we eventually signed to Warner Music. It was East West Records in Britain, and it was Atlantic Records in America. And 95, we were touring constantly, non-stop, really. And in the middle of that year, in the middle of a roasting summer, we toured the US for 6 or 7 weeks. On a bus, literally on a sleeper bus going coast to coast, which was amazing, but I think back to that now, and I wonder if I really appreciated it at the time I was 24 by this point. I celebrated my 24th birthday while we were out there. I was in Colorado, and I think we were all just so confident and cocky that we thought we'd be touring the States every year, you know. But as it happened, we never went back. So I look back and I think, well, did I really appreciate it for what it was then? But you tend not to when you're that age and you've got everything ahead of you, you know. Everything had gone right for us up to that point. And I think about 1995 as the last year, really, of innocent, joyful, hopeful music playing before it all got a little bit twisted with the record company, and pressure started to come onto us to record singles and go mainstream and do certain tours and that we didn't really want to do. And we weren't very good at playing ball. We weren't very good at towing the line with the record company. And so that caused a bit of friction. And that's when it all started to get a little bit, well, music business like, I suppose. You know, I think in 95 is the point where all that nonsense started and the fun began to fade a little bit from it all. But it was an amazing year, you know, to go over to the States and do that tour was incredible, really. And we were going all over Europe, and I spent most of that year in a van with a bunch of musicians. You know, that was really the thick of the tour inside it.
Yeah, sounds like an absolute dream. Had you played on Jules Holland before this as well? Was that 94?
Yeah. That was, I think that was December 94. I wish you hadn't brought that up because I look at that clip, or I'm forced to look at it from time to time, and I just don't know what we look like. I don't know what we were thinking, what we were wearing. It's like some sort of theatre company.
Do you still have the blue suit? Have you still got it?
I think the blue suit is hanging in a wardrobe at my mum's house, probably. Or actually, it's probably wrapped in cellophane and tucked under a bed or something. Mm-hmm. No, my mum, she wouldn't have thrown it away. But it's just dreadful looking at that, you know. And I don't look back at that experience as a very happy one. We didn't have that great a time. I mean, you're doing it. It's 2 days, I think, as I remember, or it was back then. You know, doing camera rehearsals and sound checks and stuff, and then a day filming. And you know, we were treated very much as this young unknown band that they had discovered playing in a pub, and it was like a sort of charity gesture getting us on the show. That's kind of what it felt like. There was no mention of the fact that we were actually signed to Warner Music and we were fully fledged touring band, you know. So I felt a little bit patronized. And I remember, you know, we didn't have roadies. We turned up in our old red van, left a massive oil puddle on the BBC car park, had to pack up all our own gear at the end of it. And when we'd done and finally got to the green room, everybody had gone, you know, and we were eating cold sausage rolls that were left on the plate. But, you know, again, it's one of those things. It's great to have done it, you know. I can say I've been on later with Jules, and I don't look back on it fondly, but I'm glad we did it. Yeah, for sure.
Well, out of respect, then we won't post a link to that clip in the description for this episode. Well, normally we would have done, but we'll leave that off.
I appreciate that, and I'll forever be in your debt.
No problem, mate.
I think if anyone wants to see that blue suit, they can see it on Trigger when Del Boy falls through the bar. Okay, so let's move to the end of the decade then, John. How about 1999? Where were you in 99?
Well, 99 was kind of the end of the hoax the first time around. And again, I think I was probably back in limbo a little bit. A lot of things were ending. I'd become quite disillusioned with not just that band, but with music altogether. I was tired, I think. I felt quite stifled in the band. You know, there were two guitar players in that band, for those who don't know. Both of us played very loud and very long solos, and it was becoming increasingly clear to me that there wasn't room for two of us, and there didn't seem to be any sense of compromise to me. So I wasn't really enjoying the shows very much. My songs weren't really making it through to the set. So I felt quite suffocated and stifled, and decided that I wanted to quit that band. And I think, as I remember rightly, I restarted my desires to be some sort of screenwriter, write scripts and screenplays and stuff. But I soon realised I wasn't very good at that. So I went back to writing songs, and I was at back end of '99. I was quite productive writing my own stuff. So it was the end of something, and it was the beginning of something. That was also the end of a relationship. I'd been in a 4-year long distance relationship with a girl I'd met whilst on tour in '95, and that came to an end. Yeah, it was odd. I mean, Man United won the treble. There were all sorts of terrible things happening.
Oh, you don't have to tell us. So just before we leave the sort of looking at the decade as a whole and your experiences of it, I just wanted to mention the recording of Humdinger in 1997. So this is when you've moved off of East West, and I think Jimmy Nail was on East West at the same time, which might have been why they weren't able to concentrate on you guys so much.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you go out on your own and record Humdinger in a farmhouse in Shropshire. I rewatched the brilliant documentary that you guys made about 15 years ago last week, just to remind myself of it. And I have to ask, the main question for me is the bollocks thing.
Oh yeah.
So where did that come out of? And was it a sort of, was it a release for you to do that, or was it just a just studio hijinks?
Where did it come out of? Frustration, madness, isolation. It was, I mean, we were locked up there for I think it was 3 weeks. Just us in this very remote farmhouse, and it wasn't an easy process. I mean, we spent days just getting guitar sounds because we were that kind of fixated with getting the right tone, And I think it just drove us all a bit mad. I can't remember who started it. I think it Robin or Hugh, and it turned into a competition and who could shout it the loudest.
Now he's getting fed. Bollocks! Fucking hell. Bollocks!
Okay, so we like to run down a few different cultural aspects of the decade and find out what your favourites are, what all of our guests' favourites are. So we will start with, if we could, your favourite car of the 90s. So presumably you would have passed your test early on in the 90s. So did you have a favourite car of the decade?
Well, I passed my test in '89.
Mm-hmm.
And I am going to pick my first car because it served me quite well in the first couple of years in the 90s. I eventually came to quite an ignominious end, which I'll tell you about. But it was a Fiat 128 saloon, red. I called it Luigi just because it was Italian. And it was very, very basic. It didn't have a cassette player, so of course I took my Philips cassette recorder that had served me well with my Spectrum 48K computer loading up games. I retired it from that job and put it, sort of wedged it in the dashboard of my Fiat 128 and played blues records or blues cassettes as loud as I could, with the windows down as I sailed through devices thinking I was cool. I think I eventually sold it to Hugh Coltman, who was the singer in the Hoax. Mm-hmm. He got very excited about buying it off me for about 50 quid, I don't know. But I don't remember ever seeing him drive it. And the last time I saw it, it was in his wilderness of a back garden in his house in Great Cheverel, with sort of bushes growing out of its bonnet, and and I think he eventually towed it away and scrapped it, which was a sad demise for what was ultimately a pretty cool wagon.
Yeah, I'm just looking at pictures of it now, and it look or Fiat 128. It's not your specific one, but it looks very similar to a Lada, I think, in a good way. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
it's of a time, but yeah, it's aesthetically quite pleasing. It's a real shame it's not still around.
It was the thinking man's Lada, you know.
Yeah.
There's your episode title.
Okay, so I think moving on to a topic which is obviously very close, if not closest to your heart. What was your favourite album or musical act from the 90s?
Well, I mean, I think you guys are aware of how tough a question this is, because you know this is something I had to think long and hard over. Surprisingly, or maybe surprisingly, it wasn't blues that immediately came to mind, not blues acts or blues albums. I mean, there was a bit of a surge in blues in the early 90s. You had labels like Silvertone and Point Blank releasing pretty cool blues records, but they weren't the ones that stayed with me. I had on my short list, I had G Love and Special Sauce. The first two G Love albums really made an impression on me. I like that band a lot. I remember seeing them on Later with Jules, actually. It must have been around 94. And I thought they were extremely cool. I had Reef's Glow album on my list too. I remember playing that to death. Just loving the sound of it, the production of it, and the songs, you know, the riffs. But the album that I've plumped for and the act that I've plumped for is Jon Spencer Blues Explosion. Their Acme album, 1998, really did make an impression on me. It's probably his most accessible album. I think it's just very cool. The sounds on it, the songs, again, there's a lot of humor in it, and just attitude. You know, there's a track at the end called "Attack," where he just opens with Jon Spencer shouting, "1998 and the blues is back," and then they unleash this relentless drum beat, you know, and just tremendous stuff.
1998 and the blues is back! Get together! Come on, let's do it!
And I saw them live at the London Astoria in 98, I believe. I went with Rob Davey. And it was an amazing gig. They were on stage for about 50 minutes. I don't think there was a pause in the music at all. It was again, relentless. An assault on the senses, and I absolutely loved it. That band, that Blues Explosion, was the blueprint for a lot of bands that followed, perhaps. And I'm thinking of people like the White Stripes or the Black Keys, or, you know, that kind of vibe. Just very cool rock and roll, you know. So I plumped for that album in particular. Stuck out for me when I was going through them all.
Cool. Would it be fair to say that Jon Spencer was an influence on Amor, which was obviously your first post-Hoax band?
Definitely in the mix. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I did want to go for a modern kind of approach with that first album. I wanted to embrace all those elements of, well, I suppose, programming and samples. You know, that techno side of things, I guess. I wanted to combine that with the riffs and the kind of spirit of the Hoax, I suppose. So yeah, I think it is fair to say that Jon Spencer was in the mix there.
The taste of your tears was so sweet.
So we'll go to the movies now. And do you have a standout film of the 90s?
Again, difficult one. The one I've ended up going for ultimately, I'm going to need some adjudication from you guys. I'm not sure if it qualifies. It's not what I would call a movie as such. It was not released in cinemas or anything to my knowledge. but it's a great piece of film. I'll come to that in a sec. I considered Toy Story, because I think the Toy Story trilogy is the greatest trilogy of all time. I don't care what you say about Godfather. And I also considered a film called Heaven's Prisoners. Now, I listened to your pod with Rob Bryan, and you were talking about old music videos that used to feature clips from films, from the movies that they were soundtrack to,
Yeah.
And we, in the Hoax, we had a song chosen to be in this movie called Heaven's Prisoners, and it was the single that they released alongside the film, and it was a song that I wrote called 20 Ton Weight, and it's an absolute turkey of a film, and it was awful. Alec Baldwin, Terry Hatcher, who was in the Superman suit. She was in it. But it was terrible, and I remember watching this film for the first time, waiting to hear my song, and the scene it was used in was in a strip bar in New Orleans, and it's Alec Baldwin walking into this bar, and there's this large-chested lady giving it some on the stage, and in the background there's me playing my little riff that I wrote in Wiltshire. So I nearly chose that one, but the one I have gone for, and I think you guys will appreciate this, because it's like some kind of Greek tragedy. It's like a Shakespearean tragedy. Like I say, I'm not sure if it qualifies, but it's An Impossible Job, featuring Graham Taylor, our hero.
Yeah, I think we'll have it.
Yeah.
I just think that film is a masterpiece, and it's everything you could want from a story. Not only our hero Graham Taylor and his fatal flaws and his ultimate demise, but all the satellite characters like Laurie McMenemy talking about Gaza being like a lead violinist. You got to pamper him, and all the players at the time, Carlton Palmer and Merson and all those guys. It's just a fantastic cast, and what an amazing script. Can we not knock it? Hit Les Carlton. It's just genius, and I could watch it over and over. So I'd like to pick that one if I can.
Fantastic. No, there'll be no quibbles about that.
Good.
I have a couple of favourite moments myself from that movie. First of all, of course, is can you tell your friend he's just lost me my job? And secondly is when on camera he tells David Platt that he's lost the captaincy.
Yeah.
And they sat down on like a park bench or something, or a bench inside the training complex or something like that.
It's a tough scene, man. It's a tough scene. Yeah, and it's brutal. It's brutal, but you're right. I mean, it's tremendous stuff. And Phil Neal just getting up a moment after Graham Taylor's got up and just making the same gesture.
Yeah. I think Phil
trying to tell Nigel Clough what to do when he's going on. Clough hasn't got a clue what he's trying to say. It's just tremendous.
We're all over the fucking shop then, aren't we? Keep of the lot. Come on. Bigger. We've done that fucking. Can we not knock it? We've done everything that we tell them not to do. We've done everything that we tell you not to do.
Okay, let's move on to video game. I don't know if you played many computer games in the 90s, but do you have a choice?
I'm not a big gamer, but I have had my phases of playing games. Again, early 90s, I remember going to a friend's house and playing FIFA Soccer on the Mega Drive. And I thought that was tremendous, cutting edge stuff. This would be 1993, I guess, 94, something like that. And I did go out and I bought a Mega Drive, and I bought FIFA Soccer and played that. And I played games like Road Rash, Micro Machines, I think was one, Sonic, of course. but I was never really a committed gamer. I had a little period where I got into playing Tomb Raider on the PC. That must have been around 97, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that was the first time I really started to appreciate video games as more than just a little game to kill a bit of time. You know, the first time I really started to appreciate a video game as a story. And look at them now, you know, I mean, they're bigger than movies in a way, aren't they? So I got quite into Tomb Raider. That would probably be the one I'd pick as my own personal standout from the 90s, because I do remember getting lost in that Tomb Raider game for a good few weeks and wasting a hell of a lot of time.
Yeah, brilliant game. It was in one of my choices for games of the decade, so I fully support that. Awesome game.
Good.
You mentioned liberating your Spectrum cassette player for the Fiat 128, the Thinking Man's Lada. So was that a bigger thing, sort of maybe towards the end of the 80s, or?
Well, if you'd asked me the video game question in the 80s, I'd have been all over it. I'd have been Jet Set Willy, Turbo Esprit.
Oh, Turbo Esprit.
Turbo Esprit, just fantastic. I used to stick Huey Lewis and the News sports album on and play Turbo Esprit, and I was in heaven. But that was 80s, so you know.
That's true. It's outside the remit, so we can't discuss it.
You'll cut that from the edit.
I've spoken about the year 2000 often enough on here for that to stay in. I think no problem. Okay, so I think for this next category, I think I might know what you have planned for this, and I'll be quite surprised if I'm wrong. So can we talk about your favourite TV series of the 90s?
Yeah, you've made me disappointed with my own choice now, because I think you might have guessed it. For a while, I was considering any kind of Vic and Bob show, really, because they shaped our humour in the hoax. You know, the in-van humour when you're on the road. We were always quoting Vic and Bob, whether it be Big Night Out or Smell of Reeves and Mortimer, which was pretty big at the time. And their humour has stayed with me all the way through. But if I did have to pick one, and it is comedy, and it is Alan Partridge.
There's no need to be disappointed with that choice. That's perfect.
Yeah, it's that first I'm Alan Partridge in the Travel Tavern. You know, Partridge has been such a big part of my life since then. I find myself sounding like him. I've tried to write a book years ago. I tried to write like memoirs, but everything I wrote just sounded like Alan Partridge had written it. And that was no good at all. But yeah, that first series in the Travel Tavern, fantastic stuff. I loved it. And he's like a friend to me, Alan. And I've been listening to his podcast, actually, from the Oast House. I don't know if you've listened to that. It's very, very funny. So yeah, it's Alan. It couldn't really be anybody else.
Now, Alan, you're going to have to trade down your River 800 for a smaller car.
Go on.
I picked up these brochures for the new Metro. It's a lovely car.
Len,
and if you do...
Len, I'm not driving a Mini Metro.
But you do have to make substantial savings.
Len, I'm not driving a Mini Metro.
But if you do, you can keep Pear Tree Productions going with a skeleton staff of 2.
There's no point finishing the sentence, Len, because I'm not driving a Mini Metro.
But if it...
Len, I'll just speak over you.
But
Okay, so what about a wild card? Is there anything that doesn't fit into any of the other categories that you want to get out now?
Well, I'd like to talk about service stations.
Crack on.
Oh, please.
From down the country. So obviously during the 90s, we were up and down Britain pretty much every night, it felt like, in the hoax. And service stations were a big thing when you're driving home from Carlisle at whatever time it is in the morning. And for a short time, we started a little book of which were the good ones to stop at and which weren't. And this is obviously pre-internet, just about pre-internet. And so we had to make our own archive of what was good and what wasn't. I remember Strensham being quite high in the ratings on the M5. I remember Clackett Lane on the M25 being quite high. Funnily enough, the other side of Strensham, if it was Strensham northbound, you were all right, but Strensham southbound, not so much. So we had to bear that in mind. There was always a lot of angst when it wasn't what we would call a go-inable service station. You know, you'd have to stand outside with the flowers and newspapers and ask for what you wanted. You had to go in and browse. That was part of it. That was part of the ritual. And you still get that, of course, but nowadays it's all T-Bay and Gloucester services, and everything's got to be organic and hand-reared, and it's all about farm shops. I don't want any of that. I want a Red Bull and a Snickers. You know, and I just remember the service stations being such an event in the 90s. And so, yeah, at Strensham services, I would like to highlight round about 95, 96. That was top of the pops, man.
Gold standard of service stations. Brilliant.
Back then it was, yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so we got a couple of questions that we like to use to finish up with. So the first one is, how do you think the 1990s shaped the person that you are today?
Massively, of course, because you know, my 20s were the 90s, and doing what I did in my 20s, touring the world really with a cool band, visiting all these countries, meeting all these people, different types of people from different walks of life. I was a pretty shy kid, and I would always get a little bit nervous about leaving home, spending time away from home. But doing that really brought me out of my shell. It brought me out of my comfort zone. I think it got me accustomed to situations that maybe I would have found intimidating when I was younger. It taught me not to be intimidated by strange things, different things. And I think that's carried me through in life. I think I'm not intimidated by new experiences as I might have been. So it was important in that regard, and it's just broadened my mind, I think. And I like to think it's made me more accepting of other people and respectful of other people. And when you're in a band, things don't normally go according to plan. So you have to adapt, you know, and you have to think on your feet, and you have to improvise, and you have to deal with crises that you weren't expecting. And hopefully, you know, that experience has made me more adaptable and more able to go with the flow with things, perhaps. But at the same time, I like to think every decade shapes you. You know, you're always evolving, you're always growing personally, and that's right and proper, and that's how it should be, you know.
Yeah, lovely, great answer. Okay, so that brings us to our final question, which we ask to all of our guests when we remember, and that is, what one thing from the 90s would you like to bring back?
Well, the first thing I thought of, I'm fearful that somebody might have said this already in one of your pods, because everybody I talk to about it agrees with me. And it's a football thing again, and it's match of the day, and it's goal of the month.
Brilliant.
I want Lightning Seeds' Life of Riley in the background when I'm watching goal of the month. That to me was the best possible soundtrack to that little segment of the show.
And Cole wasn't offside. On the left foot. Oh, superb! Magnificent strike by Andy Cole.
That's excellent. With Matt Letizia invariably being 3 of the 10. Although nowadays he'd probably, you know, launch a 3-hour YouTube video about who really runs the goal of the month competition.
That's true.
Oh, fantastic. Well, John, that brings us to the end. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and obviously we would love to have you back sometime to talk about another aspect of 90s culture. Before you go, though, just a couple of quick things. First of all, what are you up to at the moment, and where can our listeners find out more about where you're playing, etc.?
Well, at the moment, recovering from Glastonbury, but I've got some gigs coming up. I play with my trio. It's just called the Jon Amor Trio, but that sometimes expands to a band called King Street Turnaround, and we have a keyboard player as well. And I'm really enjoying that, man. I'm probably enjoying playing live more than I've ever done, in all honesty. I think I just feel so relaxed and determined to just have fun now, without pressure or ambition or agenda, you know. Just want to have fun, and I'm really enjoying that. And we're playing gigs pretty regularly. We haven't released anything yet on record, but we're planning that. And it's all on jonamor.com. That's probably the best thing to go and have a look at.
Fantastic. And the last thing I have to ask, and you know, this might be a world exclusive for the pod, I don't know, but I'm going to ask in the hope. So obviously the Hoax have since returned since the split in '99 at various points over the following 20 or so years. So is there another Hoax reunion on the horizon at the moment? Is there going to be another string of gigs at some point in the future?
Well, the simple answer is no. I don't think we'll do it again. I don't know. I mean, you never know. There was a time when back in '99, I would have said the same thing. But time passes, and we did get back together, and we had a good time getting back together. We did some good gigs. We made a couple of albums, and it was good, and I'm glad we did it. But I feel like we've done it now. We're all scattered around the world. But no, I can't say I'm very enthusiastic about that idea, and I'm sorry to any Hoax fans who might be listening. But that's how I feel about things. The rest of them, you'll have to ask them. But that's
well, there we go. There's an objective to get everybody else in the band on the pod for an appearance and and collect the set. Well, I have to say, being down the front by your monitors at the Corn Exchange and Devices in Christmas 2009 was tantamount to a religious experience for me. It has to be said.
You know what,
I'll always have that.
Yeah, you know what? I'm so proud of that band, and I'm proud to have been in it. And we had great times. We did some great things.
Well, John, once again, thanks so much for coming on the pod tonight. We really appreciate it, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
Thanks so much, guys. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks again to John for that. That was really good. I love our guests episodes. It's really good to hear people's experiences of what they were up to throughout those years.
Well, I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, but he's a bit of a legend in my eyes. So to get him on the pod was brilliant, and really look forward to having him back for Liverpool in the 90s in the near future.
If you want to get in contact with us about anything you've heard today or anything in previous episodes, you can do so in the usual manner. So you can find us on Twitter at allright90s, email allright90s@gmail.com, and facebook.com/allright90s. That's all letters, no numbers. And then on Instagram, we are allright.90s.podcast. And we would love to hear from you, as always. And I think next episode, we are having our summer party, are we not, Stu?
We are indeed, yes. We've been talking about it for months. We finally got it together. We've got a venue. We've got some door staff. We've got some special guests returning. And we've got even a little 90s board game that we're going to try and have a live play of and see if that works. So it's not going to be a regular episode next time. It's essentially just going to be us hanging around in the back room of a pub talking about the 90s. Actually, no, it sounds exactly like a regular episode. So yeah, look forward to that in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, it will be our first ever outside broadcast. So if anything goes wrong technically, that will not be our next episode, and you can forget everything we've just said. But fingers crossed, it will all work smoothly, and there'll be something a bit different for you next time. So until then, have a lovely rest of your early summer, midsummer, and we'll see you at the party next time. It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me. Mine's a hooch.